Okay, so a few announcements before we get started. Just as a reminder to folks, Monday is a holiday, so there are no classes. Obviously, we don't have this class on Mondays anyway, but keep that in mind for your other classes. Wednesday is going to be an online only day that you can kind of do at your own pace, and I'll show you a little bit more about that. The reason is I have a guest speaker, but the way that they're doing their presentations is sort of on demand. So they put together a video and like a worksheet to work through. So I'm gonna have you do that and then just submit the worksheet that they made. So I'll show you where all of that is. Okay, and then I sent out an announcement on Wednesday about instructor conversations, and those are for points. So if you haven't sent me an email about scheduling one, please do soon. You just need to include at least 3 times that you're available. That way I can make something work in our schedules. The instructor conversations don't take longer than 30 minutes max. Most of them are only like 15 to 20 minutes, but I'll schedule for a full half hour just in case. So before we jump into stuff, I'm going to show you just where some resources are. So if you're online today, which is everybody, you're going to head over to week 2, and you'll see that I have the PowerPoint and the actual recording from Wednesday up. So this will take you to a YouTube page with the recording. Then there was the participation assignment, which if you haven't turned in yet, you can turn it in here. And for today's participation, I'm going to have you fill out a weekly schedule for me. So we'll kind of go through all the different scheduling options in this presentation. And you can use either the template that's here or whatever presentation, or sorry, not presentation, whatever calendar you like to use yourself. So there's also some time management resources here. And if you pop this open, there's a semester calendar, a weekly schedule, a daily schedule, and an action plan. So the action plan is what we discussed last time. The daily schedule just looks like this. It's a nice little schedule planner for yourself. And then the other 2 schedules, one is a weekly schedule, which is an Excel file. If it looks a little funky, you can always print it out and it looks the same, but a little bit nicer, and you can just like color it in and send it to me. And then the other one is an academic calendar, which on Excel looks funky, but what it is just like every week, oh, this is kind of impossible to see, but every week of the semester with all of the major dates and deadlines. So it has the add drop deadline, early warning grades, midterms, when finals week is, when classes go all online, last day of class, everything like that. So it's really useful. We'll go over it a little bit more as we go through this presentation. Before we jump right into it, are there any questions? And you can send them to the chat or just ask them. Okay. And as a reminder, if you are interested in face-to-face, I'm in room 326 in the admin building. I got here around 9 this morning just to make sure it was open and everything. So if you have any trouble finding it, just let me know. With that, we'll jump over to a PowerPoint. So again, like I mentioned, I love dumb memes, so I always make them. But today we're going to talk about time management, which honestly is one of the most critical aspects of college success. So if you're a first-year student, it might be a big shock to suddenly be in charge of your own schedule. I remember like high school, you don't plan anything for yourself, it's all done for you. So figuring out how to do that time management part of your life is really difficult. So if you're struggling with it, don't feel bad. Everyone does, I still do. So for the longest time, the way that I kept track of everything was by writing important due dates on random Post-it notes and hoping I didn't lose them. Is that a form of time management? Yes. Is it maybe the most effective for me? No. So what we're going to talk about today is what time management is and what we use now and how we can maybe adapt it to be more useful for ourselves. So if you want to drop in the chat what forms of time management you use currently? And this can be anything, and the answer can be none. That's totally fine. But what sort of methods of time management do you guys use? Do you folks use? Anybody?
Like I kind of like make a daily plan each day. I don't set it up for weeks or something in advance. It's just kind of the day before I figure out what I'm going to do.
Yeah, that's great. I know I do a ton of like daily to-do lists, and I usually write them the night before just so I don't forget anything. Yeah, mainly rely on a weekly calendar, just kind of do things. Yeah, those are all valid. Those are all forms of time management. And I think like the most important thing that I want you to pull out of this is that time management is what's useful for you. So we're going to break down a little bit of what goes into actually effective time management. And number one is identifying your priorities. Then you want to actually make your schedule visible, create an action plan, get organized, and breathe. So those are kind of the components of good time management. So when we identify our priorities, it's really important to consider what's on our plate, what's in our lives, and then what needs to go into a schedule. So the first two are what students usually always get: classes, study time. Most people remember to add in work. But things like meals, sleep, and especially breaks often get forgotten by folks. But they're just as critical and just as important to incorporate into your schedule. So when we build our actual schedule, you're going to start with the things that have set times that can't change, stuff like classes and work. And then you're going to add in study times. And I try and keep study times to 1 to 1.5 hours. And the reason for that is that usually after an hour, our productivity starts to go down, and our retention of new facts also starts to go down after about an hour. And then again, don't forget meals, breaks, and other activities. So what we're going to do is kind of go through what a sample schedule might look like. And then for our participation assignment, you can either do this right now, kind of along with us, or you can do it later and submit it by the end of today. So, oh, that was a weird transition that I didn't plan for. So, like I said, class times go in first. So let's say that you're taking 5 classes this semester. So that's around 15 credits. Your schedule might look something like this. Pretty simple. I just have all of my course times in there. Next, I'm going to add in work because, again, that's a really set thing for me. Maybe your work schedule changes every week, so you might not be able to reuse it, but make sure you get that in pretty early. Now, I'm going to try and add in some homework and study times. And I want you to notice that I kept to my promise of only keeping these blocks an hour long. And I put a lot of them in. So I'm aiming really high in this schedule. I'm going to be on top of it. I'm going to do a ton of homework and studying. But I spread them out, and there's quite a bit of gaps between them. And you'll notice that sometimes I have it right before a class. Sometimes I have it right after a class. I know for me personally, if I was already in the kind of like study zone, I would just stick some studying in right after class or right before it. Now, sleep. So it's really important to kind of set yourself a bedtime if you can. I know it sounds really weird and it takes some getting used to, but writing down when you want to try and get to bed is really important. Now, it's not always going to go to planned, but if you put that in your schedule, it's a reminder to yourself to kind of like stop after a certain point and give your brain a break. And again, meals. So I'm not going to tell you when, how, or what to eat, but you should be eating, right? Like you need nutrition, so stick it in your schedule. And things like meals can also be considered breaks for yourself, you know? So I try and separate. I don't try and work while I'm eating breakfast or work through dinner. Sometimes I work through lunch and that happens. But trying to actually put those reminders in to get some food, to take a break for yourself is really critical. And then I'm going to put in breaks. So breaks are really, really important. And it's really easy to forget to take a break, especially if you're being really hard on yourself and you're just like, I just got to power through and get stuff done. putting those breaks in is a nice reminder for yourself. One of the other things that a lot of students that I work with have told me is that they feel guilty for taking a break. And I get that, you know, a break can very quickly turn from 5 minutes to like 2 hours. And then, yeah, you might feel a little bit stressed out or a little bit guilty for taking that break. It's okay. If you actually plan in the times that you want to take a break, it's easier to stick to that break time frame, right? So planning them in alleviates the guilt of actually taking those breaks, and it's a reminder that you want to get back to something. So you'll notice here on like Sunday, I have half-hour breaks put in between my homework and study sessions. And that reminds me to chill a little bit, and it makes me feel less guilty for taking a break between those things. So planning for every hour of the day can be really overwhelming, right? So if we look at this schedule, it's jam-packed, and honestly, it makes me kind of freak out. I don't like to schedule every single hour of my day. So it's important to remember that you only need to include as much detail as you need. So this is much more similar to what an academic weekly plan looked like for me, where I'd put in my class times, I'd put in my work hours, and then I'd just do a couple of areas of study. So let's see, I have 6 hours during the weekdays, and then some study groups on the weekend and some other study. So this schedule isn't jam-packed, but it has some simple reminders. And if you're really new to trying to do a full week schedule, and especially if you're new to incorporating scheduled study time, it's best to start out small. So if you've never tried to like schedule study hours for yourself, start with like 3 in the week, 3 hours somewhere throughout the week. If they fit well into your life and they work really well, awesome. Keep those, maybe add 1 more in, and slowly build this schedule out. One of the things that's really hard is if you go from 0 scheduling to suddenly scheduling your life, it's really, really easy to overdo it. So rather than trying to aim huge, take small incremental steps to getting used to scheduling for yourself. Oops. So let's talk about right now. We're kind of in this weird zone of online classes and in-person classes. Some are synchronous, meaning that you meet all at the same time. Some are asynchronous, meaning you can do it whenever you want. That freedom and flexibility is really nice. However, sometimes that lack of structure leads to a lot of procrastination, and it can be really hard to get your work done on time. So it's even more important right now to build that structure for yourself. So when it comes to online schedule building, it's important to be specific, to say exactly what you plan on doing during the time that you block out. So we're going to kind of do a similar exercise. If your classes require you to attend a Zoom lecture, plug those times in first, right? So this class meets at a given time. I'm pretty flexible with attendance, but it is helpful if everyone is here to follow along with the class. So plug those in first. Then plug in some time for if your classes are asynchronous to actually watch those lectures, right? So if you're interacting with this course not in time with everyone, actually plug in a time to watch the YouTube videos that I post or to go through the slides and take notes on them. Then plug in homework and studying again. You know, give yourself some time to do that, just like before. And when you have online classes, it's really important to be flexible. So maybe a lecture 1 week and like going over the notes and stuff only took you an hour, but the next week it's really dense material and it takes you like 2 hours to do. Make sure to add some flexibility into your schedule to be able to do that. So here I have a lot of gaps between my classes and lectures and stuff like that. And that allows me that flexibility in case things run long or don't take as long or anything like that. So for this schedule, I didn't add in every other thing that I did in the other one. And it's just to show that, like, again, it's whatever works best for you. So in this schedule, I didn't add in my break times or anything else because maybe I'm good at taking breaks and that's okay. So The next part of actually building your schedule, once you identify the things that go into it, is make sure that it's visible in some way, shape, or form. And you want to find the method that works for you. And actually recording what you need to do can help motivate you to get it done. So just telling yourself, oh my gosh, I need to study, it can be really hard to actually overcome that barrier and start studying. But writing down that you're going to study from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. gives you a time frame in which to do it and kind of gets you into gear to actually get it done. So when it comes to making your schedule visible, there's all sorts of options, right? There's paper schedules that I have posted. Use your phone, right? Like I use my iPhone all the time to get like, oh, that sounded like an advertisement. Anyway, I use my phone all the time to put in all of my important stuff. Because I work in a pretty busy office, Outlook calendar is like my life. It's all color coded. It's all like perfectly together. So use whatever thing works best for you. There's also a ton of organizational apps that you can try out. So just finding something that works and knowing that it might be a combination of different things. So for me, I use a daily written to-do list, but then my weekly calendar is all online. So just figure out what method is best. So the other thing to consider about your schedule is the scale that you want to use. So we have a couple different ones. There's like semester, monthly, weekly, or daily, and we're just kind of going to go through those real quick. So a semester schedule is what it sounds like, a whole schedule of your semester. So when it comes to this, it's really, really great for finding trends in your semester. If we look at this calendar, we can see that chem homework and chem tests are always on Wednesdays. And we see that our ISEM stuff is always due on Thursday. So you can get a really big picture of what your week's gonna look like. You can also identify really busy weeks. So maybe when you have a bunch of tests in 1 week, you're gonna be able to see that better from a semester. Unfortunately, you don't have a lot of detail in a semester calendar, right? You can't say exactly what you're gonna do every day. It's really hard to cram that into this. So you might take it down to a weekly schedule. This has way more detail. You can plan out kind of your days by the hour. It's easier to see where you have free time, but in those examples that I showed, it can be a little overwhelming when you look at a week and realize just how many tasks you need to accomplish within that week. And you can't easily see what's coming up next week. So I always use these calendars in tandem, right? I get my big picture view and then I break it down for every week so that I have a better idea of what's going on. Now my favorite calendar is a daily calendar, right? A daily schedule. So it's as simple as a to-do list. And this is a great way to actually give your day some structure. It can be a little overwhelming if you try and schedule too many things into one day. So I have a general rule of thumb. Don't schedule more than like 7 big tasks into a day. If you can, keep it to like 5 big tasks. So I usually create a master to-do list on like Sunday, and then I chunk it into like 3 to 5 items a day for the week. That way it's not as overwhelming, it's not as terrifying to look at. So we talked a little bit about action planning yesterday in the context of goal setting, but I want to show you some other ways that you can action plan. So as a refresher, an action plan is a way of taking a large task and breaking it up into smaller, more manageable pieces. And you can action plan big projects, homework assignments, study sessions, anything really. I have action planned my relationship to an extent, which is crazy, but like do it, I don't know, it's fun. When you're making an action plan, it's important to include those intermediate deadlines so that you can prevent procrastination. So here's an example of how to action plan your study plan. Let's say that you want to study chapter 6 of biology and you want to finish that by September 26th. You're going to break down how to tackle all of that. So on the 17th, I'm just going to skim the textbook chapter. I'm going to make sure that I attend the Zoom lectures that relate to that chapter on the 20th, the 22nd, and the 24th. And as a reminder to myself, I'm going to take some detailed notes. Then I'm going to write down all the important terms and concepts on one page on the 21st. I'm going to try out some practice problems on the 23rd. And then I'm going to write 2 to 3 sentence summaries for each section of notes on the 24th. Now, this might seem like a lot of work, but when you give yourself this big kind of study plan, it's a lot easier to keep up with it and not fall behind in your studies. Plus, you get the really good satisfaction of like checking off items as you go through it. And this is something that you can do for preparing for finals or midterms or anything like that, so that you don't end up 3 days before trying to cram. So we already talked about action planning a paper, but just here's a little more like worked out, fleshed out example. So again, I have the due date clearly listed, and then I break it up into really small tasks. And you'll notice that like I'm giving myself some flexibility in between days to make sure that if something takes a little bit longer, that's okay. I have time to like complete it. And then finally, you can action plan your day. So you could think of it like a structured to-do list and just setting some reminders for yourself. So I included an item of check email and respond. And that's really, really critical right now. And it's honestly something that I hear a lot of students talking about of like, oh, I missed this like announcement from my instructor or anything like that. So right now, where everything's kind of like a toss-up about how the semester is going to keep looking, we don't know, like classes change from in-person to online, anything like that. It's really important to kind of stay on top of your email, and I encourage you to check it at least 3 times a day. So I aim for like 9 a.m., somewhere around noon, and then at least once before the end of the day. And this just helps you make sure you aren't missing any huge things. Now, if you're like me, I'm on my email from like 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and usually later, but that's just because of my work. So I kind of have to be there. You don't have to be tied to your email like that. Just make sure that you're keeping an eye on it. So I also have when my classes are each day in this action plan, a reminder to summarize my notes, and then some general times when I'm just going to take a break, which is really important. So making sure to incorporate that break time into your daily schedule can help you feel less stressed. So I want to take a second and see if any of this is like clicking with you, if you have any questions, or any of these ideas like, oh, that could actually be useful in my life. And you can say something, you can type something, you can give me a thumbs up, anything.
Yeah, this sounds like something I'll use in my life, I was thinking.
Awesome. Yeah, and like I mentioned with some of the schedules, you don't have to like dive into it full bore right off the bat. Just trying 1 or 2 of these different things can be really helpful in the long run. So I'm going to share with you my absolute favorite thing on the planet when it comes to like time management and getting stuff done. And it's this thing called the Pomodoro technique. And Pomodoro is Italian for tomato. And the reason it has that name is because the person who created it used a little like kitchen timer that looked like a tomato. Fun fact. So the Pomodoro technique is time management for the small scale. And it's a way to organize how you're actually working during a study session. So you, like an action plan, you take the task and you break it into chunks. But in this case, it's time chunks. So for every 25 minutes of intense focus, you give yourself a 5-minute break. And a 25-minute session is called a Pomodoro. And then after a Pomodoro, you take a break. And after 4 of these back and forths, you take a 30-minute break. And what this does is it keeps your drive and your motivation up. So how many of you, when you would go to the library, would sit down and you're like, I'm gonna study for 3 hours. And then you only end up studying for really like an hour and a half because you easily get distracted by stuff, right? Like that was me. But if you sit down and tell yourself, I'm only gonna study for 25 minutes and then I'm gonna take a break, it's suddenly a lot easier to study for those 25 minutes. And if 25 minutes is too long, that's okay. Do 15 minutes and a 3-minute break. Just whatever combination works best for you. And this is actually a structure that works really well in group study sessions as well. Because if you're like me, I like to like socialize during my group study sessions. And I have a problem of getting distracted and like wanting to talk with my friends. So what we started to do is just set a timer for ourselves and say like, okay, we're all gonna work really hard on something for 25 minutes. And then when we get to our 5-minute break, then we'll like chill and socialize, and then we'll jump back to it. And that helped us stay on task. And what happens is just by doing this back and forth, you suddenly take like 100 minutes, right, if you're doing 4 Pomodoros. So almost 2 hours worth of studying that's been broken down into these short, really productive chunks. One of the things to keep in mind is that like, if you're going through one of these 25-minute chunks and you're like in the zone and you're working really well, you don't have to take the 5-minute break. Just make sure at some point to take a break so you don't like overwork your brain. So I really recommend trying this out. You can use it for a lot of different things, whether it's like an actual assignment that you need to get done or just some other work. Like I do this in my office. I'll work really hard on some of the stuff that I need to get done for academic coaching and then take a 5-minute break for myself. And it's really nice and I get a lot done in the day. So we talked about how we're gonna structure our time and all of that goes into scheduling. But there's another aspect of time management that goes into play here, and that's actually finding a place to work and setting up our space. So how many of you have a dedicated space wherever you're living to study? And you can just like say yes or thumbs up or anything like that. Like, oh, I can look at the chat. Yes. So yes and no's from folks. It can be really hard. So you might be in your dorm room and like not really have a ton of space, or you might be in a Greek house or an apartment and really kind of just stuck in your classroom or in your bedroom. So it can be really hard to find that space for yourself, but it's still important to try and create it. So I always recommend to avoid working on your bed when possible, but I also fully realize that not everyone has a desk. So if you have to work from your bed, try working on the end of your bed that you don't normally sleep on. So like at the foot of your bed and like sitting upright. That way you still have that mental separation of like sleep and work, which is really important for yourself. And then make sure when you're working to keep everything you need nearby. Notebooks, writing utensils, headphones, charging cords, anything that you might need. And the reason for this is you don't want to break up your workflow. Like you don't want to be stuck like really working hard on a paper and then suddenly your computer is like, you have 5% battery and you have to scramble to find your cord, and it kind of like throws everything off for you. If you have everything with you, it's going to be a lot more productive. Oh, goodness. The other thing that you want to keep in mind is try and minimize distractions when possible. So putting on some headphones, some background music, anything to kind of block out noise and distractions is really good for yourself. I know personally, I get super distracted by everything on my phone. So if I need to focus, I put it on airplane mode just to like ground myself from that. And then make sure to share with your family, your roommates, anybody that you're living with, when you need a quieter environment to work in. So if you have roommates, sometimes it can be good to sit down at the start of the week and just say like, hey, I've got a test on Wednesday that I'm gonna need, you know, some time to study for. Do you mind if we not have people over for X amount of time? Or if you need a really strong internet connection, letting folks know like, hey, our internet's kind of spotty, but I have to do this like interview on X day. Can everyone else get off of the internet so I can have a really good connection for that? And letting folks know about that ahead of time is a really good way to avoid any conflict. So the other thing that you want to keep in mind when it comes to organization and time management is to create a workspace that is both physically and digitally efficient. So establish an organization system that has clear and consistent file names and arrange files and papers in a way that makes sense, right? So more often than not, I like sometimes do a key smash when I'm doing a document that's not really like ready to go yet. I won't always name it the most effective thing. So trying to like get some naming systems in place can help you in the long run. So here's an example of one way to do it. And that is to like make a folder for each class. Within that folder, have all the major assignments. Within those folders, have rough drafts and final drafts, and then have your final actual little class listed here. And you'll notice that I have like Christensen, which is my last name, and SA2. And I highly recommend, like as an instructor, if you can label your files with your last name first right there, it really helps us when it comes to grading to be like, oh, this is clearly this person's, right? Like there's no question about who submitted that essay, and I clearly know which essay it is. So taking a little bit of time now can really help minimize the time it takes to find your assignments and make sure that you turn in the right thing. And just as a heads up, if you have a joke title for your essay, don't forget to change it before you submit it. When I was working on a research project, I labeled some of the tables I was making BFT, as in big effing table, and forgot to change that before I submitted it to the very professional researchers that I worked with. And they all had a good sense of humor and laughed at me, but like some people won't. So make sure that whatever you're labeling stuff is appropriate when you submit it. Okay, so how can we handle interruptions, right? We've got this amazing schedule figured out. We know exactly what we're gonna do during the week, and then life happens. So what are some things that have popped up that like you didn't anticipate, or like things that have happened that kind of threw off your whole schedule? And you can type them or tell me just some examples. Family matters, yes. So like maybe someone gets sick in your family, or someone in your family just needs you. Those are really big things that come up in life. So there's lots of different interruptions that we can run into. So some things to keep in mind is that priorities change. Maybe at the start of this week, your biggest priority was getting a rough draft of an English paper due way ahead of schedule. But then suddenly like a math assignment pops up that you forgot about. Your priority is gonna have to shift to accommodate that assignment, right? Understand that that's okay. Be a little bit flexible with it. Life happens. So right now we're in the middle of a pandemic. Life is gonna happen, right? Maybe someone gets sick, maybe you have to like cover a work shift for someone, like stuff is gonna happen, and be a little bit nice to yourself when those things pop up. Remember that a good plan can always be improved. I have had students who came in to this class being like, I am perfect at time management, I have the perfect schedule. And then the first time something pops up that they weren't expecting, it throws them off completely. So keep in mind that no matter how great you think your schedule is, it can always improve, it can always change. Things don't always go according to plan, right? So you might have extra time. Let's say a paper that you scheduled 3 hours to write only took you 2 hours. Now what do you do with that extra hour? Do you give yourself a break? Do you work ahead on another assignment? Figuring those things out. You might also have less time. So let's say a paper that you planned for took 5 hours instead of 3, and now you like ran into the time you were going to study for another exam. How are you going to shift your schedule around in order to accommodate those things? And then keep in mind that other people might need your help. So Cora brought this up in regards to like family needing your help. Your friends might need your help, you know? Like I had a lot of friends my junior year who went through really rough breakups and they needed a person to talk to. It's okay to incorporate your friends into your schedule and to give them the time that they need. Just keep in mind what you still have to get done and how you can shift that around to accommodate those needs. So this is gonna be a little hokey, but keep in mind that through all of this, remember to breathe. So right now is really stressful. The start of the semester is always really hectic and hard to like get your hands on. So take a sec if you're feeling overwhelmed and just like breathe through it. Understand that it's gonna be all right. So I wanna jump back really quick to our BB Learn page for our folks that came in just a little bit late. No worries on that. If you go to week 2, you'll see that I uploaded the lecture from last week, or from Wednesday, and the presentation, and I'll be putting this recording and the slides up hopefully tonight, or hopefully like within the next hour or so when I get back to my office. So the participation for this week is to build me a weekly schedule. And you can use this template that's listed here. It's an Excel spreadsheet. If it's a little bit wonky or weird and confusing, you can print it out. It looks like this. You can print it out, color it in, just take a photo of it or scan it and send it to me, whatever works best for you. Or if you're using like an app or like an online calendar, just like screenshot the week. If you could include things like classes, study hours, scheduled breaks, just give me some idea of what a weekly schedule will look like to you. You don't have to go into crazy detail, right? Like, I don't need to know, nor should I know if you've got like doctor's appointments or anything like that. But if you just want to list out like appointment or private or whatever, include as much detail as you are comfortable with and that you would be useful for yourself. And then we've also got the week 2 reflection. So similar to last week, great job on those. You all like hit the word count perfectly. You added a lot of detail and depth. Ooh, I've got hiccups, which I appreciate. One like general thing to keep in mind is make sure to do like a grammar / syntax read through before you submit it. I'm pretty usually lenient on the first reflection because everyone's figuring it out. But I do ding like a couple like half points here and there if there's a ton of grammar issues. So just read through those really quick before you hit submit for them. And then the final thing on this week is the time management resources. So you can find the semester calendar, weekly schedule, daily schedule, and action plan all right here for you to print off. I did make individual folders of like all of these things for you. And if you would like them, I'm more than happy to deliver them to you. Just let me know how I can get them to you in case you don't have access to a printer, and I will bring them directly to you, like DoorDash for academics. The last reminder is just if you haven't scheduled your instructor conversation, please shoot me an email with at least 3 times that you're available to do that, and then I'll set up a Zoom link for us. And then finally, next Wednesday, we're going to have an all online class that you can do at any point during the day on Wednesday. So it's going to be a lecture on stress management from Vandal Health Ed. They're really amazing folks on campus who offer a lot of like mental and physical health resources for students. So they aren't like the Counseling and Testing Center or Vandal, like the Student Health Center, but they offer a lot of really great and useful tips and education. So they're going to give a presentation. It's a recorded video on stress management, and there is a worksheet that goes along with it. So I'll just have you download that worksheet, fill it out, and submit it to me as your participation for that assignment as you watch that video. I'll post a reminder, so no worries there. And then, yeah, any questions? Anything that I can help with? Yes, no? Cool. Well, if you don't have any questions, you are free to be done a little early. If you would like me to bring you the printed out materials, just let me know. I don't have another meeting till 11, so I'm happy to like meet you outside a dorm and give you a random folder. So just let me know what I can do. And with that, have a lovely weekend. Have a lovely long weekend, everybody.